She was just a little girl, quiet, fragile, breathing through the soft hum of medical tubes as the plane lifted into the clouds. To her, this flight was supposed to be routine, a step toward healing. But to one flight attendant, it became something else entirely, a moment of cruelty disguised as authority. In front of stunned passengers, compassion vanished. And what happened next left a family shattered and an airline scrambling to hide the truth. Because that little girl's father wasn't about to forgive or forget. And when he decided to fight back, the world finally saw what the airline desperately wished no one would ever see. Ava was 7 years old, bright-eyed, curious, and braver than most adults. Born with a rare respiratory condition, her life depended on the quiet whir of the small machine she carried everywhere. Her father, Marcus, guarded her like treasure, every tube, every breath, every detail of her care rehearsed and perfected from years of vigilance. They were traveling home after a medical checkup, a rare weekend of laughter between hospital visits. The airport was crowded, but Marcus kept calm, guiding his daughter through the maze of travelers. To Ava, it was all an adventure, the polished floors reflecting her sneakers, the planes lined like silver birds waiting to take flight. To Marcus, it was another test of patience, watching for stares, the careful questions that always seemed to hover when people noticed his daughter's dark skin and the medical equipment attached to her. He was used to being patient, used to explaining. But that day, a storm was already brewing in the most unexpected place, 30,000 feet in the air, where judgment and power would collide. And soon, one careless act would expose how thin the line really was between professionalism and prejudice. The plane hummed with the usual mid-flight rhythm, soft chatter, overhead air vents hissing, trays clinking with half-finished drinks. Marcus leaned over to check the flow from Ava's portable oxygen machine. Everything was fine, steady green light, even breathing. She smiled at him through her mask. For a brief second, he relaxed. Then the flight attendant appeared. At first, she seemed polite, curious even. She asked what the machine was for. Marcus explained gently, showing her the medical clearance papers he always carried. But her expression hardened, skepticism clouding over professionalism. She repeated the question, slower this time, as if he were lying. Passengers nearby began to glance over. The moment thickened with that quiet, weary kind of tension Marcus knew too well. The attendant walked away but returned minutes later, face set with authority. Without waiting for explanation, she leaned toward Ava, hands moving fast. Marcus barely had time to react before she reached for the tubing. The soft hiss stopped. Ava's tiny chest hitched. Panic sliced through the calm of the cabin. "What are you doing?" Marcus's voice broke the low buzz of passengers. Heads turned. Some gasped, others froze. The flight attendant straightened, muttering something about safety protocol, avoiding his gaze. Ava began to cough, the ragged, helpless kind that ripped every parent's heart to pieces. Marcus fumbled to reconnect the machine, hands shaking, mind pulsing with disbelief. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not again. No help came, not right away. The attendant had retreated, calling for her supervisor. The other crew members hesitated, whispering, watching Marcus as though he were the problem instead of the father of a gasping child. It wasn't just neglect. It was the quiet, devastating assumption that he didn't belong, that his panic was aggression, not fear. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He replayed the scene over and over. The moment those tubes were ripped away, the terror in Ava's eyes, the flight attendant's cold stares that said, "You're the problem." When dawn came, so did resolve. He drafted a complaint complete with medical records, witness statements, and flight details. What he didn't expect was the airline's response: silence, then denial. A week later, their official statement appeared online. Words carefully arranged to defend, to dismiss. They called it a misunderstanding, said procedures were followed for passenger safety. There was no mention of Ava's name, no acknowledgement of harm, just corporate polish over cruelty. Marcus felt something ignite inside him, an anger sharpened by years of swallowing injustice to keep peace. This time, peace had nearly cost his daughter her life, so he went public. He sent the story, photos, documents, timestamps, to reporters, advocacy groups, and social media. He didn't expect it to spread like wildfire. Within hours, the images of Ava hooked up to her oxygen machine mid-flight shattered the airline's facade. Passenger accounts poured out online, people who had seen, who had recorded, who confirmed every detail. The airline scrambled. Statements changed. Faces appeared on screen urging patience as the investigation unfolded, but it was too late. The world had already chosen a side. For Marcus, the attention was dizzying. Cameras, interviews, messages from strangers thanking him for speaking up. Yet beneath the headlines was a silent, relentless pulse. Fear. Not just for Ava's health, but for how power always finds ways to rewrite pain into policy. Then came the call, a notice from the federal agency overseeing aviation conduct. An inquiry was underway, and the flight attendant had been suspended pending investigation. For the first time since that flight, Marcus exhaled. Still, one question burned through the relief, heavy and unspoken. Why did it take going viral for a black father and his sick child to be believed? And how many others never would be? Months passed, but the echoes of that flight never faded. The investigation led to a quiet settlement, a carefully worded apology, and new sensitivity training guidelines announced with polished smiles. Publicly, the airline claimed accountability. Privately, Marcus knew it was damage control. Still, something had shifted. His story had forced a conversation far louder than the company's press releases, a reminder of the humanity often ignored at 30,000 feet. Ava recovered physically, her laughter returning like sunlight after a storm. Yet for Marcus, every future boarding pass carried memory. How easily care can turn into harm when bias hides behind authority. He hadn't set out to become a symbol. He was just a father demanding decency. But sometimes justice begins with one person refusing to be silent. The videos of that day still circulate online, shared under captions about courage, about how one act of truth made a system answer for itself. Schools used his story in discussions about prejudice in everyday spaces, about how racism doesn't always shout, it often whispers, right until someone makes the world listen. Marcus's victory wasn't in a courtroom or a paycheck. It was in knowing that no parent would board a plane again without knowing they had the right to speak up, to expect humanity. The cost was painful, but the revelation was necessary, because racism isn't a headline, it's a pattern. It lives wherever comfort is valued more than conscience. And until empathy becomes policy, stories like Marcus and Ava's will keep happening, just with different names and faces. So, the question that lingers long after the engines fade is this: how many times must we watch pain ignored before compassion becomes the standard, not the exception?